Writers, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your unique dialogue tags, things like he whispered, she snorted, he bellowed, she huffed, rarely add anything to your writing. In fact, more often than not, they kill dialogue and they gunk up prose. Allow me to explain, but first let's look at the purpose of dialogue tags, why we as writers often feel the need to use those unique tags, what's wrong with them, and in the process, how to make your dialogue and your writing itself much, much better with one of my favorite revision strategies that will eliminate our dependency on those obnoxious dialogue tags. Fundamentally, the purpose of a dialogue tag is to make clear to the reader who is doing the speaking. That's really it. And that's why most of the time all you should need to use are dialogue tags like says or said, or asks and asked, depending on which tense you're writing in. Says and asks are preferable dialogue tags because those particular dialogue tags are, in effect, invisible to the reader because readers are just so accustomed to seeing them. These tags orient the reader, but they don't distract from the dialogue itself. But still, writers often go way overboard with the artificial dialogue tags, or those dialogue tags that explicitly tell the reader how something is being said, and thus take emphasis away from the dialogue itself. So why do we as writers do this? Often it's for the sake of variety, because we feel that we're using said or asked too much. Or we feel the need to clue a reader into the emotions behind a character's dialogue. So let's take a look at the emotional side of it first, and then we'll come back around to discussing variety. If you feel you need a specific dialogue tag in order to convey a certain emotion or action from the character who's speaking, you probably don't. Let's say you've written a scene, let's say it's like a YA novel, where a character asks another on a date and you have another character respond with, quote, "I've got better things to do," she scoffed. Now, do we really need scoffed there? Since it's not an invisible tag like said or asked, it's distracting a reader from what the character actually said. And in this case, what she actually said already implies scoffing. How many times have you ever heard someone say, "I've got better things to do," without scoffing? In which case, either cut the dialogue tag if it's clear who's doing the speaking, or if not, then just say said. But maybe the emotion behind the dialogue isn't totally evident in what is actually being said. For example, maybe they're saying something ironically or sarcastically. So let's say that in the scene that we just looked at, your character is asked on a date by someone they like, someone that they have a playfully sarcastic rapport with, and when asked on the date, she responds playfully, "I've got better things to do." Maybe your first instinct as a writer then is to write something like, "I've got better things to do," she quipped flirtatiously. And here, that tag, quipped flirtatiously, is cluing a reader into the irony, but it's also just like really heavy-handed and totally overshadows the dialogue itself. But your reader isn't stupid, because if you've written these characters well, which means your reader has a sense of who these characters are and how they interact, they will naturally intuit how dialogue is being spoken because they see how your character occupies their world. And that's why when writing dialogue, you should often supplant those explanatory artificial dialogue tags in favor of character action. Show, don't tell, right? So this will not only give your reader a clearer understanding of the character themselves, as well as an image of the action taking place, but it will also allow you to cut that dialogue tag to give equal weight to dialogue and action. So to return to our flirty scenario, instead of this, we could revise it into something like this. She folded her arms, fighting back a schoolyard smile. "I'm not sure. I've got better things to do." Here I've included "I'm not sure" to kind of play up the coyness of the statement, but also the action that introduces the dialogue not only clues us into who is speaking without ever stating it explicitly, but it also gives the reader a mental image of someone who is, kind of pretending a certain level of consternation that nicely contextualizes the dialogue as being flirty. Notice how all of this conveys that idea of quipping flirtatiously without ever having to say it directly. Instead, showing the reader what it looks like to quip flirtatiously from this particular character. Now, what about using dialogue tags for the sake of variety when just keeping track of who is speaking in a conversation? Well, in a conversation between just two characters, you really don't need to rely too heavily on dialogue tags because there's a natural logic to conversation in which one person speaks and the other responds and a reader can keep track. But sometimes it's nice to reorient if the conversation is going on for a long while, or maybe another character enters into the scene and now you have three people. in which case most of the time, again, said or asked will totally suffice. You might feel like your reader is going to think that you're a bad writer since it seems like you're using those dialogue tags everywhere. But remember, those tags are largely invisible because readers are so accustomed to them and they automatically know the purpose of those tags as a means of orientation. So that hypothetical criticism of repetition exists pretty much solely in your own head. However, if there is a flood of said or asked, particularly in a scene of more than 2 characters in which it feels necessary, this may mean that you need to introduce more action to contextualize which character is speaking, like we did with that flirting scene earlier. Or your characters all think and speak the same, which is a problem unto itself, and you may need to add more unique flair to those characters. So a good revision exercise is to go through your manuscript and find some of those artificial dialogue tags and ask yourself if it's necessary at all. If not, just cut it and move on. Or if it is necessary to contextualize who is speaking, try said or asked instead of something more unique. But if you've lost something essential about the manner of their speaking, then consider either retooling the dialogue itself or else introducing it with a line of action in which we see how the characters convey the dialogue. Now, are there exceptions to this? Sure. For me, nothing hits quite like a "he whispered." But the reason why that hits hard sometimes is because when used sparingly and very deliberately for a specific purpose, it leaps off the page in such a way that a reader intuits that the fact that he is, in this case, whispering is more important than what he actually said, which is sometimes exactly what you want to convey. So let me know in the comments which dialogue tags drive you the most crazy and which ones you refuse to give up, because let's face it, we've all got at least one.